generically speaking, players dramatically undervalue what I'm going to call tertiary defenses. Your primary defense is your HP and your positioning. Okay? By which I mean, just if you have more HP, you don't die. And if you stand in the correct place, you don't get hit. Then your secondary defenses are, in the example of PoE2, that's your resistances, your armor, your evasion, and your energy shield. Every single player you ever talk to, if you send them a clip of you dying, they will ask you about these stats. Oh, how much max HP did you have? Wait, why did you stand there? The boss is going to slam there. Wait, were your resistances capped? Wait, how much armor did you have? These are the questions you're going to get asked. You're going to get asked about your primary and your secondary defenses. Okay? What's massively, massively, massively undervalued is what I'm going to call your tertiary defenses. And these are your stun threshold, your ailment threshold, and then, like, other things like ailment immunities or ailment durations. This could be like bleed duration, charms, and so forth. In the current PoE2 patch, there's a lot of conversation in Discord servers I'm in about, oh my god, I keep dying to ignites. I hate ignites. And then I'll ask people, okay, so I presume you have capped fire res because you're in maps and you've been in maps for a couple of days. Do you have a charm that gives ignite immunity? And they go, no. And I go, well, this is the third day in a row you've complained about ignites, but then you haven't invested in ignite resistance. And they go, yeah, but my res are capped and I have a fuckload of ES. Why should it matter? And I go, because you're dying to ignites, dumbass. You can say that the game balance is wrong. I don't agree with you, but you can say that. But you're still dying, and you still have a charm slot where you have a stupid charm that you aren't using. Like, you have a rarity charm. Take your gold charm out. Like, rarity is for motherfuckers who don't die. If you're dying, you don't get to put rarity on your gear. Put ignite duration or an ignite charm or whatever the fuck, because, like, you're getting owned. Take your gold charm off, put your ignite charm on. Thank you. Let's talk about stun threshold in particular for a second, because ailment threshold works a similar way. And here is a node that will teach us what stun threshold does. So here's what it says. Here's what stun threshold does. Okay? Your base stun threshold is equal to your maximum life. A hit that deals damage equal to or greater than your stun threshold is guaranteed to stun you. And the chance scales down linearly for lower damage hits. But stun chance of less than 10% is treated as 0%. So, I'm just going to draw a very simple graph here for us. Trust me, extremely simple graph. So, this is the size of the hit. This is the hit size. This is your HP. This is 100% of your HP. This is 0% of your HP. What stun chance looks like is this. Okay? If the hit does damage equal to your max HP, you will get stunned. Okay? We'll in fact draw it like this. If it does equal to or greater than your max HP, you will get stunned. If it does 50% of your max HP, there's a 50% chance of you getting stunned. If it does 20% of your max HP, there's a 20% chance of you getting stunned. If it does 9% of your max HP, there's a 0% chance of you getting stunned. This tells us something super interesting about stun threshold. If we look at the amount of life that we can expect you to have in some random middle of the campaign zone, like I'll talk about Drowned City. In Drowned City, you can expect a strength or strength hybrid player, by which I mean a warrior, a mercenary, or a druid, to have, very roughly speaking, between 850 and 1000 max HP. Depends on the player, depends what they've traded for, what they've prioritized on gear, but like ballpark, 850 to 1000. Okay? So then we can take a character in the game, and I can take off all of my gear, right? I can just take off all this stuff that gives me defensive stats, everything. I can wear nothing, and I currently have 1,294 damage, and we can go to a middle Act 3 zone, like Drowned City, and I can walk into the mob, and I'm wearing no armor. My current armor is 0, my current evasion is 16, my current block chance is 0. For all intents and purposes, I have no physical defense of any kind. And then I can walk up and let this guy hit me. Okay? Roughly speaking, I took 100 damage. Okay? We'll just call it 100. What we know from interviews with people who do monster balance and design at GGG is that the intention is that, roughly speaking, a typical size white monster hit in the campaign will do somewhere between 6 and 10% of your overall HP during the campaign. Whoever designed that particular monster that just hit me expected the player to have roughly 1000 HP at this point in the campaign. Or if you're playing an energy shield based class, a combined amount of HP equal to 1000 between your HP and your ES. Here's an important thing to note. As a speedrunner, or as a competitive league start player who's really pushing on day one, you're probably going to have something like 650 HP. So if we take this away and we bring up a calculator and we go 100 divided by 650 is 15.4% of your total max HP. So the probability of us getting stunned is 15.4%. Super interesting to note. So let's just go look at, for example, since we're talking about mercenary, but this applies to other classes. In the mercenary portion of the tree, is there any stun threshold? Yes. Yes, there is. There's some here. 20% increased stun threshold. And then there's some down here, 12%. And here's another percent, 60% if you haven't been stunned recently. So let's just start with the 20% example. If I take my max HP, right? Let me zoom in so you can see the actual numbers here. So if I then take my 650 HP and I only take Feel No Pain, and it pushes my stun threshold up by 20%, now the probability of me getting stunned has fallen from 15.4% to 12.8%. So that's an improvement. It's not great, but it's an improvement. Then let's suppose that instead of taking Feel No Pain, we instead take Steady Footing. Okay? Steady Footing says that if you take one 12% node on the way, and then it says if you haven't been stunned recently, you get 60%. Okay? Now the probability of me getting stunned is 8.94%. But remember, stun threshold says a stun chance of less than 10% is treated as 0%, which means if I have 650 HP and I allocate Steady Footing, I will never be stunned by that hit, which means that the problem of being surrounded and getting light stunned cannot happen. Now, suppose that the enemy gets a really big hit and I lose the 20% bonus. Okay? Meaning, you look at this node, Steady Footing, and it says 20% increased stun threshold if you haven't been stunned recently. So suppose I do get hit by a big hit, and it does stun me, like against a boss or something. Now, there's a 4-second window where my stun threshold is lower by 20 percentage points. So now I get 52% increased stun threshold instead of 72%. Now the probability of me getting stunned, 10.12%. Which is dramatically lower. It's 1 in 10 hits instead of the previous number that we were talking about, 15.48%, which is very roughly speaking 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 hits. Okay? In order for me to get chain stunned, in the previous case, the enemies have to be attacking fast enough to light stun me repeatedly, and I have to be surrounded by 6 or 7 enemies, which is a realistic number for me to be surrounded by. And in this case, I have to be surrounded by at least 10, which just because of the geometry of circles cannot be possible. So if I allocate Steady Footing at this point in the campaign with this particular amount of HP value and so on and so forth, I cannot be chain stunned. Because if I take a circle, like you could do this with 6 drinking glasses at your house, okay? Take out 7 drinking glasses and put them on the table in front of you, and then see how many you can get to touch the center glass all at the same time. The answer will be 6, and that's just because of the geometry of how circles work. Okay? So here's your main thing. How many enemies can surround it? I take the same size circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's not possible for there to be 10 enemies hitting me at once unless they're ranged enemies, in which case skill issue. So I think that there's this problem that I see among speedrunners where people talk about armor as mattering a lot. Well, let's go look at what the armor formula does for a second. The damage reduction is equal to your armor divided by your armor plus 12 times the damage taken. So a very high amount of armor for you to have at that point in the campaign would be around 1500 on a mercenary. So your damage reduction would be 1500 divided by 1500 plus 12 times 100, because we decided the hit was about 100, and that's 5/9. Okay, so you'd still take around 44 damage. That's not nothing. It would take around 15 hits to kill you. But the more important thing is, if you can't get hit 15 times, you can't get hit 15 times. So it's actually more important to spec stun threshold super early than armor super early. And the reason for that is that if you're able to get away, like if your max HP is 650, and you're able to get away, the enemies can't hit you 6 or 7 times in one go. They just straight up can't, because they can't stun you to hold you still. You just run away. Improving the number of hits you can take from 7 to 15 does not matter nearly as much as improving the probability that you don't take multiple hits to begin with. So my whole argument is, after talking to a bunch of high-level PoE speedrun players, is that people are overvaluing defense and undervaluing stun threshold and flask benefits. Because if something hits me 3 times and then I press my flask and my flask has increased amount recovered and increased rate recovered, then like it just doesn't matter. So there's the idea. I've been spending all morning thinking about these new nodes. I want to show you these nodes, and then I want to tell you a bit of history. So there are these new nodes on the tree, and there are very few of them. There's like 8 points of this in total on the entire tree. And what it is it's this stat called stun recovery. And it's in fact a huge amount of stun recovery. Right, you can get 80% increased stun recovery. And what stun recovery does is it causes you to, like, when you get stunned, there's an animation of your character going, "Huh!" and you can't do anything during that animation. And this shortens the duration of that animation. This is a massively important stat in other ARPGs, but not in the big 2 modern ones, by which I mean Diablo 4 and Path of Exile 2. So for example, if we go to the Diablo 2 section here, and we look at breakpoints and animations, okay, you can see that Teo 1904, our Lord and Savior himself, has put all these summary tables here for how many cast frames you have as a function of your faster cast rate stat for every single different class. And you'll notice that faster hit recovery and all of the breakpoints associated with it are also here, and it's for every single class. So this is an important enough mechanic in Diablo 2 that world-class players like Teo, okay, I want to be clear, Teo is a multiple-time speedrun world record holder, one of the fastest players ever from level 1 to 99, Maxwell content creator, YouTube author, like very, 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 very high-level player for very, very, very many years. This guy's really, 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 really good at Diablo 2. And this guide is still being updated. It last got updated last year, even though this game is 25 years old. And so you'll notice that like the hit recovery frames for this start at 13 for whatever class I'm looking at for the Necromancer, and you can get it as low as 5 with amounts of FHR that you can actually achieve. And so what ends up happening in games, in PoE, in Diablo 2, in all the different things, is that you, the character, are a circle. Okay, and surrounding you are enemies, and I'm gonna blow your mind here. If I take the same size circle and surround this circle with other circles of the same size, it will be, and this is really gonna blow your mind, exactly 6 enemies can stand around you. Okay? So like, if the enemies have the same hit size, like, character model box as the player, exactly 6 of them can surround the player. Okay? Now, suppose that all these enemies are hitting me, which they are. So this guy hits me, then this guy hits me, then this guy hits me, and so on. What ends up happening is, say that it takes 24 frames for an individual enemy to hit me. Okay? Like, they can hit me about twice per second each, let's say. And then I'm going to be taking, on average, 1 hit every 4 frames. Okay? On average. Because I'm being hit at this. Now, what I need in order to survive is for there to be a gap for me to do something. For me to blink, for me to leap slam, for me to raise my shield, for me to press my flask, for me to run away, for me to hit them back, whatever it is. So if you model out an average rate of 1 attack every 4 frames, you'll realize that you end up needing to have E times 4, which is about 11 frames. The largest gap you can expect in any given, like, 2-second span is, on average, is around 11 frames where you have an action window. So if your hit recovery frames are higher than 11, every single time you get surrounded, you will die. Okay? So what you need is your hit recovery frames in Diablo 2 to be 10, or even better, 9 or 8. Okay? So let's just look at this table for a second. Let's close paint. You can see that if you start with 13 frames of hit recovery, for you to get to the place where you're probably surviving on your Necromancer, is you need 10% faster hit recovery, or 16 or 26 in order to get to these breakpoints, approximately. I'm making huge mathematical broad sweeps, but like, the point is, a tiny amount of this stat probably saves you in a huge fraction of cases. Okay? When you're surrounded. If we go back to the PoE2 planner section, and we just look at stun recovery, you can see that if you came over here, which is very near to the beginning of the druid tree, so if you're playing some melee-focused bear druid, and you're getting stunned a lot, or you're charging into the middle of enemies, and you're getting surrounded a lot, and dying, you're going to come over here, you're going to take stun threshold, and then you can just take 1 or 2 points, and you can get 20, 20, 40. You can get 80% increased stun recovery, which, if we go back over here, would push you from like 13 recovery frames to 7, and not quite to 6. Okay? I mean, it depends on what class we look at in Diablo 2, but roughly, it'll push you from like 13 to 6, or it'll push you from like 15 frames to like 8 frames. Okay, so it's gonna massively increase the rate at which you're stun recovering, depending how long your actual stun recovery animation is. So the reason that this is so important and so well known in Diablo 2 is because Diablo 2 is a PvP game. PvP. And the reason that this is important is because your attack animations also matter. Okay? So suppose that you and I are going to do some melee PvP in Diablo 2, because we hate each other. And I'm going to play a melee class, like, for example, suppose that I'm going to play an Amazon, and I'm going to get a bunch of increased attack rate. Okay? We'll do it with cast rate for the sake of discussion. Okay? So I want to get my, like, attack frames from, let's say, 19 to 11. Okay? So I stack a bunch of attack speed on my weapon so that way I can hit you, and every time I hit you, I light stun you. And every time you get light stunned, you can't move. What that means is, if I have high enough attack speed, by getting 40 increased attack speed on my gloves and 40 increased attack speed on my weapon and so on and so forth, I can reach all the way up to the point where I can do an attack every 11 frames. If you are playing your favorite Necromancer and you have no FHR, you're going to be recovering every 13 frames. Well, I'm attacking faster than that. I'm attacking every 11 frames. So if you can only recover every 13 frames, you literally cannot move. I hit you. If I hit you first, if I have superior range, I throw a javelin. You cannot move, and you will be chain light stunned to death. And I will win our PvP duel and take your favorite Pokemon card. Okay? So the how do I say this? The balance of how this works in Diablo 2 PvP is that if you know that you're going to be PvPing against someone, you're balancing your attack rating against their defense rating, your attack speed versus their hit recovery rate, your cast speed versus their cast speed. All these things matter in the PvP setting. And so if I like hate you and you hate me and we're going to PvP to settle our beef, I'm going to spend time in the fucking sheets like trading for gear to like, oh, I currently have, 70 FCR, but if I move up to 75 FCR, then I'll be casting every 10 frames instead of every 11. And that's 9% more damage, even though it's only a tiny amount of things, because it pushes me above this breakpoint. So as a consequence, like in Diablo 2 PvP, tiny amounts of increases in item quality give you massive advantages in your actual ability to like kill someone in PvP. Because you might, for example, suppose that you only needed to reach the 12 frame breakpoint for our Necromancer cast rate, let's say. Or even, here's a better example. Suppose that you, during your construction of your character, you find a bunch of gear that gives FCR, faster cast rate, okay? And you end up having 100 FCR on your gear. Between your wand and your rings and your amulet and your gloves and whatever, you get 100 FCR. Then you come and look at the table, and you go, oh shit, my resistances kind of suck. And then you go, wait, I have 100 FCR, and I'm in the middle of no man's land between two breakpoints, right? Because there's a breakpoint at 75 and a breakpoint at 125. So I have this amulet that has a bunch of FCR on it that's not actually doing anything for me, because I can get rid of 20 FCR, and I can fall from 100 to 80, and my actual cast animations won't change. Because I'm still above the same breakpoint. So I'm not actually gaining any benefit from that FCR. I can get rid of it, and as a consequence, I can then invest that slot or that amount of money on the trade economy in getting something that gives me another stat that I care about, like mana recovery rate or faster hit recovery or block rate or something like that, okay? So the reason that this is so important is because it allows you to do arbitrage to like min-max about the breakpoints. And this is why Diablo 2 PvP is so deep, that there are still people doing competitive PvP in the game 25 years later. Even though it's not a PvP-focused game, it's a PvE-focused game, it ends up having like shockingly well-balanced breakpoints for cast rate, hit recovery rate, block rate, increased attack speed, etc., etc. Okay? So, that's a huge deal. Like, let's just start there. That's a big deal. And this goes way deeper than I'm explaining right now, because like understanding the difference between a cast trait and an action flag is kind of important. But long story short, you like getting FHR is incredibly important so you don't get stomped by being chain stunned to the ground. So if you look at what speedrunners have struggled with historically, if you look at like the zones in the game that are likely to kill a speedrunner, it's narrow corridor zones with high amounts of mob density where the mobs are doing primarily physical damage. And the reason that that matters is because of this effect that I was talking about earlier, where you're likely to get like chain stomped to the ground. Now, I want to make a point here, which is that